Welcome to our show, Your Miracle Resource. I am so excited to be here in 2020 with all of you listening to our podcast and watching our show. I have a very, very special guest for you. You know, as we set these 2020 goals, we often have a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress that we deal with in our work life, professional life, and personal life. The other part is we talk often in our communities and in our country about mental health and how to keep mental health and to get people the help that they need. I also want to share with you that I have a good friend who was in a recent car accident. Now, the guest today is going to be able to help this person. So don't just think of yourself as you watch this show. Think about the people that you know that need help with stress or pain management or mental health, or they need a counselor. I'm lucky and so blessed to present to you my friend Nick, who is going to talk about his business. Nick, I'll turn it over to you. What is your miracle resource? What do you bring to all these people who are stressed, who need somebody to talk to about counseling? Maybe they have pain management or mental health issues. Tell us how you help. What's that talent?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Katherine. I'm really excited to be here today. So I'm a nurse anesthetist. My miracle resource is just that skill I bring with pain management. But in my history of being a nurse anesthetist, I've always approached each patient thinking, well, how do I want them to wake up? So some patients, you want them to wake up crisply as if they never had surgery. You want them to ask, hey, when are we going to start? And then there's others, often those who struggle with mental health issues, that it works out better for them if they stay a little sedated, just kind of sleep it off as if it's a lazy Saturday morning or something to that effect. And I'm probably thinking of Saturday morning because of the pancakes we were looking at earlier.
Yes.
But that's another story for another show, our apple cinnamon show. We definitely have to do that.
Okay, so that's fun.
So that's my history. I've always been focused on what medications can I give to get the exact response that I need. And so although I have some experience in psychiatry as a nurse, with the business I have now, Alleviant Health Centers of Akron, that's always been a passion of mine. We have these people who are stressed, who are tired, mental health has failed us in this country. How can we make things better for them? How can we start with immediate results? And a lot of times that'll give people the impetus to continue on. I have a history in holistic health as well. Mm-hmm. I think I was trying to say scholastic. You know, like those scholastic book fairs from 8th grade. Yeah, that's going to also be another show of ours. After this apple cinnamon show, we're going to do one on scholastic book fairs. You won't want to miss it. So in holistic health, there's that concept of slow, gradual changes working with your body. But many times it's expensive. It takes a long time. There's a lot of wasted supplements of, oh, I read this on Google, why don't you try this? And so a lot of times if we can get powerful results quickly, then that'll give people the stimulus realizing, oh, my health is improving. I am feeling better. The depression is lifting. So now it makes sense to look at healthy fats or to change my diet or to exercise or some of those things that otherwise they may make a good meme on the internet, but by itself it's not enough to move the needle, especially when we're talking about stress.
I just love your approach, and when my daughter and I attended the seminar and we talked with you, what I love about the approach of you and your business is just what you said about some people need that Saturday morning, that slow wake up. Some people want to see results and move the needle. You really look at your client and where they're at and provide the right treatment. So I want to talk with you about, again, the recent crisis of people wondering where do they go, and if they want a counseling appointment, they might have to wait 3 months. With you guys, you have a team, and I want to pull up the first slide so they know a little bit about the business.
Sure.
And you can talk about why you started it. Here it talks about there is a better way, and I agree from watching you in action how you meet people's needs. So did you want to cover all of those that are on screen?
Sure, as well as I can see them since I left my glasses over there.
Okay.
But no, it's fine. The basics of how we work is that it's integrative care. For example, a lot of physicians will call my office and say, well, why do you want clearance for this treatment, or why are you involving us in this? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, these patients have been to 3, 4, 5 specialists, all of which have their narrow area of focus. Let's get them all together. Let's use everyone's brain as opposed to going from a problem from just a pain perspective of, okay, we'll give you opioids or we'll give you this medication, or turning it on its head and saying this is all in your head, there's nothing really going on here, we'll just give you a medication so you'll feel better about the pain. Mm-hmm. So because most of our patients have a combination of a lot of these, and many times it's underlying inflammation that's the culprit for both mental health and for pain. So our approach is always, well, let's bring in as many providers as are willing to talk with us, to strategize. And that does take time, which is why it's more difficult, but we get much better results if I can bring in a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, or a pain medicine specialist for sure. So that's part of it. And the other issue is quick care. So in this area, it usually takes a few months to get in with a counselor or psychiatrist. We can usually see children or adults within a week. And it's because that way you're dealing with the problem that led someone to making the appointment, especially in acute situations. By the time they get seen by someone, well, it's a different problem and often a much worse problem than it otherwise would be. So that quick, consistent care really matters, especially because a lot of times someone will make that effort to make that phone call, and then they'll have weeks and weeks to rethink it. Do I really need help? Maybe I'll go somewhere else. And so that's one reason why many times I'll work with other nurse anesthetists, I'll work with psychiatrists, with counselors, and say, okay, here's the specialties that we have that no one else has in this area. So send our patients for that, but you keep them for everything else. And that works a lot better so that it's not all or none. Again, the idea is you have multiple providers working together to get the best results for each patient. And there's more accountability that way too, especially with pain management. It can be very difficult of, okay, what is this patient taking? What are they trying? What do they read on the internet? Even with holistic health, it's a big issue of trying different supplements that can interact with medications. And so you need that model where people are working together, and it has to be practical too. What are the real goals here? Is this fibromyalgia? How are we going to attack it? Is the underlying issue inflammation? So we need to talk about diet and exercise right away. So without that, you just end up with cookie cutter medicine where every patient gets the same thing. And it works okay in research studies, but in the real world, patients typically aren't going to go to the doctor unless they're kind of an outlier where they're having these issues that they haven't been able to solve before. So taking the traditional approach doesn't work. So that's why we have ketamine infusions. We're the only ones in Summit County offering Spravato. It's an intranasal ketamine. And these are drugs that work in much different ways than your typical psychiatric or pain medication. It's different receptors, it's more direct pathways to the brain, to nerves, to actually grow neurons to form new pathways of thinking. But you can't leave someone with a new pathway of thinking without giving them the tools to use it. I talk a lot about how many times our identity is in our wellness or our illness. And so if something works immediately, where you've been depressed for 20 years and you have one infusion and you're starting to feel like a different person, well, how do you reconcile that? How do you go from an identity of I am a sick person to an identity of I am a healthy person? And that's why the counseling is so important. Because even if you say, okay, now I'm feeling much better, this is my new identity, I still don't think that's ideal. Because if who you are as a person, if your self-worth depends on your health or what a great job you do at your occupation, then if that gets taken away, you're left with nothing. I think because you work so much with different businesses, I'm sure you can relate to, there's some bosses where if a project fails, they go to pieces. It's like watching a toddler in action. You probably think, is this a cereal aisle? Is mom not buying you Captain Crunch?
Right.
Did you really want the Fruit Loops and we're buying you the generic version? Like, what's going on here? And that's because the whole identity, the whole sense of worth is so closely tied to that. And so if we could build resilience by teaching people if your identity is not tied to your exact health state today, because otherwise you wake up sad and you feel like a failure. The pain returns and you feel like you've let people down. And that guilt just adds to the stress. And obviously that's why we're here today, to talk about stress, but sometimes it comes from unusual approaches of even feeling better can be stressful. What do I do with this? Is it going to last?
It's like a new normal.
Right, exactly.
And I'm just so impressed because on the first slide, it said the lifestyle coaching. Like you said, someone who has lived with the disease and now that is lifting. they need some coaching. They have a new way of how they're going to deal in the world.
Right.
The other part is, you and I had talked about the fact that we don't want any addiction. We don't want people to get on something and become addicted. So when I talked with you about my friend who was in the car accident,
Right.
everybody's saying, oh, you should be on this med, this med. They don't want to get addicted. That's why I want them to come see you. When something happens or there's crisis, whether it's stress or a car accident or a disease, it's the whole approach that I'm impressed with that you do. And you've got an incredible team. Did you want to share them now?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, let's take a look at that slide.
We can put that slide up. So our psychiatrist is Dr. Molina. He's our medical director. And he's the one who authorizes, okay, this is the right medication for you. And again, since my specialty is specifically anesthesia, he handles a lot of that. What combinations of, do we need the ketamine infusions? Do we need a nasal spray? Is it better to be on some sort of antidepressant at the same time? Or is this a person, many times we have issues where the patient say, hey, I'm not sure if I'm depressed. I've been on this medication for 20 years. I don't remember how I'm supposed to feel. And that's a huge issue because otherwise we're all working as veterinarians where, okay, they meowed this way, or I think the patient wagged their tail, and that must mean that this is the issue. So if we can teach people to know themselves, to know what they're feeling, what their issues are, it's so much easier to put them on the right path. And Dr. Molina also, we have transcranial magnetic stimulation at our clinic. It's a way to use magnetic waves apart from medication for depression, anxiety, and OCD. A lot of those are very tough to treat pharmacologically because they're so innate to what a person is, going back to identity, that do we want them to feel numb where they're not depressed, but they're also not feeling joy? So it's a great way, and it's covered by insurance, to find new ways of feeling, because a lot of times it's an up and down process. And that's how life is. That's how life should be. We have our highs, we have our lows. And so for many people, it's just a consistent low. And so even though a lot of these treatments, they'll incrementally improve, one thing that we teach is it's okay to have ups and downs. Like, this is getting back to the resilience, the way that life is supposed to be. So Dr. Molina is really good with that. And then we also have Stephanie, one of our counselors. She works with children. She does a lot of trauma work, anger management, stress. And Sarah, our other counselor, her specialty is with addiction. So a lot of opioid use. We've successfully weaned patients off of methamphetamines, cocaine, things of that nature. But that's a very integrative process. It takes a lot of work, a lot of research. We all work very closely together to make that happen. It's not something where we just, oh, why don't you try this to get off of that? Because I think we need to take a step further beyond which medications are addictive and which ones aren't, and realize that if you offer something that gives hope, that has results right away, you need to channel it as a tool, because otherwise, no matter how harmless it is, it will become something that's addictive. So I know this almost sounds like I'm saying, don't eat kale smoothies, they'll be addictive. But it's important to have more than one tool, because not that there's going to be a sudden kale famine and we'll never have kale again. But many times if we just focus on one aspect of our health, like, well, it's my exercise that keeps me sane. Well, what happens if you have an injury? Or my diet is everything and I prove my worth and that I should be a healthy person because look how well I eat compared to other people. That can be an issue too. So it's better to have a holistic model. And I don't mean holistic as in supplements and herbs. I mean holistic as in there's a wide variety of things that we can try to make pain, to lessen the effects of pain, to help with mental health, anxiety, depression, and a lot of those disorders that go together. I went to a meeting yesterday where we were talking about eating disorders with trauma and substance abuse, how it's so difficult to find practitioners who can treat all of it simultaneously. It's almost like, okay, we got you off this substance, but now you're instead having another eating disorder. So taking that holistic approach means that we can tackle everything.
Which is amazing.
And there's still goals, obviously, and a lot of that's patient-directed. What do you want to work on? So, and that's the important thing is when you empower people instead of, here's your pill, see you next month, it's amazing the results you can get.
And in the next slide, one of the things I wanted you to share, and we have an interesting slide with all the different toxins, stress, food particles, organ malfunction, pathogens, and drugs. I want our audience to know, whether you're listening on podcast or you are local in the area, it is important, and we're going to keep that slide up just for a second more so that way you can talk
Sure.
about it. I have a friend who's going through quite a lot, who's in another state, a southern state, and Nick will be on phone, or one of his counselors will be on phone with this person. When you look at all of the different things, toxins, stress, pathogens, so many times, and we have it on screen, it is tough to know what to do and what to focus on and underlying issues. So you put together a team to help with all of those. So let's focus on just one of them, stress.
Sure.
You put, and we talked about it, I think, online. There were 5 things, 5 tips that you wanted to share. Do you want to share those with us?
Sure. Or it was a wonderful email I sent you. Who knows if I'll be able to pull those out of my head now. But I'm not
That's
the type
why we
of,
have Nick doing his own show.
Right.
Someday he's going to have his own show.
But that's why I'm not really a note person. So one of the things I told you about stress, and to be clear, for example, last month I was talking a lot about stress of the holidays. Sometimes there can be a stress from a lack of stress. And what I mean by that is the holidays are over, family time's over, and now some people are like, well, what do I need to do? I've almost gotten used to that. Do I need to work harder? Do I need to do this? And so part of that is to breathe, both in the literal sense of deep breathing helps stimulate the vagus nerve, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, which is more like the rest, relax. Your husband eating pancakes, that's the parasympathetic nervous system, especially because those apple cinnamon pancakes smelled so good. So to channel that rather than, oh, I'm sure there's some medicine I can take, you just take deep breaths, you relax, you concentrate on the moment, you practice mindfulness, which is just an awareness of who you are, where you are, being present in that moment, instead of the way that we often are, where, I'm sure it's the same for you running a business, where I'll start one task, start another task, find out later, oh, I've got 7 draft emails, none of them quite got to the send button. So just being in the moment, it's better for our brains because our brains take a little bit of time to switch from one task to another. It's like having a computer where you have multiple tabs open. My office manager, Sam, loves doing that. It'll be 20, 30 tabs.
Really?
And then it's a question of, okay, where were we? Where do we need to start? So breathing in both the physical sense of deep breaths to calm down your system and in the metaphorical sense of you need to pause, you need to take breaks, whether it's a Sabbath break where you take a whole day off just to reflect, or just carving out moments of the day where you're just with yourself. Because that's where we come up with our best ideas anyways, when we're bored, when we're in the shower. And so sometimes, especially for those who have high performance jobs, who have that stress, the only time that you will come up with the next good idea is when you let your mind wander, rather than always being channeled, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. So stress is a huge issue. Our cortisol levels increase, we have hormone imbalances, we can't sleep right. So another, and this sounds indirect, and I probably won't get to all 5 with the time we have left, but that's fine, is probiotics. And that sounds like it has nothing to do with stress, with health, but I've actually seen many patients with underlying anxiety and depression were just healing their gut, starting to eat better, having good bacteria instead of the bad bacteria, makes a marked difference. Now there are studies, and they do show that eating a healthy diet is actually superior to just popping a probiotic before you eat or at night before you go to bed on an empty stomach. But you do need to start somewhere. And so a lot of times I find just some simple supplementation, along with probiotics, healthy fats, especially for women, those who are getting our ketamine infusions often for postpartum depression or other issues that can be very severe but are oftentimes limited. I recommend evening primrose oil a lot. It can help balance hormones. It's similar to fish oil, but the issue sometimes with fish oils is there's only a few brands that really have a high quality product. And again, the focus is not to obsess over, here's a magic supplement, here's this superfood that will cure everything. It's more of an integrative approach where you take a small step and see what you can do with that. So, and one final one would be to talk, just like we are now. Sometimes it's a plug for, oh, come see our counselors, we can make you feel better, whether you're ruminating about the past on how you can improve and what happened to you and how can you get over it, or, and this is often our focus, okay, you're in a better place already, how can we move forward? What are your goals? How can you take your new identity, as I was speaking about, and move forward in your new life. And so having a network of people, whether it's your friends, your family, and people that you can speak to about what you're feeling without feeling guilty, without whitewashing, oh, well, I guess I'm not that bad today, but people who you can be honest with that will listen to you. And there is a balance there, because at the same time, accountability is so important, because we could all complain to people all day long about the myriad of things that happen to us, but that's where accountability of how do I move forward, how do I find that balance between realizing this hurt me, this was an issue, how do I place this in its proper context and then get over it? Because I'm the type of person who it can be very stoic. So obviously anesthesia, working a lot with trauma, patients die often, and I've handled that very well, but even in the last few years I've realized, well, I handle that too well. It's better to be vulnerable, to suffer for a while, to take the process that it takes to get over something, rather than saying, oh, that's just small stuff, everything's small stuff, and moving on to the next thing. And especially we work with a lot of first responders, and that's a huge issue of the manly way to do it is to just be like, oh, that didn't bother me at all. And that can be true. Again, I'm a more resilient person than most, but long term, that's not a good way to live your life.
Because you're stuffing down those emotions.
Right.
And that's why your team is needed, because you've got the whole team that can pull every piece together, because when we don't handle those emotions, just like you said, with talking to an expert, and we've talked about this a lot on our show, many people will talk to a friend, but is that the right person? I think that your team, because it's experts, can really take an expert approach to the solution.
Right. And honestly, I think a good reason to talk to a psychiatrist or a therapist is that they can ascertain for you how good is your network. Is it helpful to talk to friends? Because we have a different approach. We want you to get better and leave our practice and tell other people about it. We don't want to see the same patients over and over in the same seats. And obviously, some people do need lifelong care, and we insist that they come back many times. But in other cases, it's, okay, let's get you to a better place, and then we've given you the tools, now go out there, and we're always here for you if you need us again. Because many times, it is that network of friends and family that really matters. If you think about some of the best tech companies in the last decade, Uber, Airbnb, why are these companies so successful? Because we don't have that network of, hey, can you take me to the airport? Hey, can I spend the night at your house? And so these multi-billion-dollar companies are there because our society is fractured, because we don't have that natural, this is who I can rely on when I need something. And when you don't have that, you can't have that resilience to face life's challenges with a whole community at your back instead of just feeling alone and isolated.
So for audience members and those listening, isn't it refreshing to hear Nick say, we want the patient to get better, go, live your life, refer us, but not stay because you want them to get better. That's refreshing in our society. And as we go to the next slide, I want you to share anything upcoming. Maybe there's some seminars. We have on screen all of the information, your Instagram, your Facebook. We've got the website, the phone number for everyone. And that's great, because we will share it not only for ourselves, but with other people.
Sure.
But anything coming up, any exciting things that are coming up.
And I will say the number for those on the podcast is 888-951-HEAL, or you can email info@alleviant.com if you want an appointment. As I said, we can get you in very quickly. We did have an event last night. It was about detoxifying for the new year. We talked about laundry detergent, soaps, cosmetics, beauty. We went off into tangents about B12, inflammation, which is a huge topic. I give a lot of talks about that. Hives, the correlations between mental health and physical health. And so about once a month we have classes like that. We're actually planning a similar class next month. We don't have a date quite yet, but just because of the response last night, that these practical tips of, oh, here are some literal products that you can buy that are efficient. And I tend to be a frugal person, so for me, especially with natural medicine and with a lot of supplements, my issue is always like, well, how can we look at this carefully and really add value to everything that we do? I don't think any health decision should be made unless we can see some value from it, as opposed to the blind, okay, let's get this test done, let's get that test done, and we have a diagnosis, but perhaps not a way to treat it.
So true. So as you can see, and those who are on podcasts can hear, you know why I want Nick to have his own show. I want to thank all of you for being with us today, and just know that I have pushed Nick to do a show because he has so much to share. And we'll keep giving you information on our Miracle Resources Facebook page to get you up to speed on what Nick is doing and all the seminars. And I want to invite all of you to join our book club. The book club continues, and it is for Discovering Your Dawn and Your Strategic Personal Brand. I want to thank each of you for joining us today and learning about my amazing friend, Nick, who is a wealth of information, as you can tell, and why I want him to have a show, because he's really helping the world and getting people in and getting the help they need quickly, which is such a blessing. Thank you, Nick, for being such a blessing. And thanks to all of you for listening and joining our show, Your Miracle Resource.